So today's Midrash will be primarily on Devarim words. We'll also have some slides on Yeshayahu. Before we get started on that, however, while some may still be eating, we can still do the blessing after food. So let's do that. Abba, we have eaten and we're satisfied. We thank you for the food. In Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen.
So this was our first verse, Eleha Devarim, Devarim being the title of this week's portion. There is an English translation out of that. From JPS, these are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan, through the wilderness in the Arabah near Suf, between Paran and Tefillah, Laban, Hazrot, and the Zahav. Here were the aliyot that we read. And here's our first question is, according to the traditional count of Ramban, how many mitzvot are in this portion? Here are your choices, from 2 to 10. So who wants to vote for A2? Any raising hand votes for A2?
You raising your hand?
I'm either raising or not raising my hand.
There's always a way out.
Or is it 3? Who wants to vote for 3? Anybody for 3?
3.
Who has 7? A couple for 7.
Why chose 7 instead of C?
Who has 10? Who, like Jim, is afraid to vote? Okay, well, first one out is, which one's the first one out? Which one's the least likely to be right?
Last one in, first one out.
So you're saying D is the first one out. Is that your prediction?
I suspect either A or D.
Well, the first one out is, in fact, D. D is the first one out. But 7 was a popular choice, but it is the next one out.
Okay.
So it's either A or B.
It didn't seem like there was something
And in this case, it's A2. Right, the 2 mitzvot are here.
Now name them. Oh, you shouldn't have put that slide.
I'll name them. They all come from the same verse. Don't show partiality in judgment, because neither the poor person is rich or because the person is poor. In other words, you can't show partiality. There are similar mitzvot. I mean, this really is a question of where are mitzvot counted from. And this is the case where these 2 are counted from here. And not fearing a wicked is parenthetical man in judgment. In other words, you don't base a judge not base his judgment on fear of retribution by a person who is either powerful or wicked or has the ability to do him harm. And we read from the Torah, but this is from Targum Onkelos, which is one of the official Targum of the Torah is from Onkelos. It reads, "These are the words which Moshe spoke with all Israel beyond the Jordan," which is from the Torah. Then it continues on, reproving them because they had sinned in the wilderness and had provoked the Lord to anger on the plains over against the Sea of Suf in Paran, where they scorned the manna, and on Hazrot, where they provoked to anger on account of flesh, and because they had made the golden calf. So there are additions to this. What is a targum? It's an Arabic word. It means translation, but a targum is typically a translation with commentary, so it gives an idea of what's being said. So where are we on the calendar? That's the next question. Where are we on the calendar? Well, say again?
Rosh Kodesh, just after that.
July, it's July.
July 22nd.
Those are all reasonable statements, but not exactly what I'm looking for. So the Shabbat before the 9th of Av, Tish B'Av, is also called the Shabbat Chazon, the Sabbath of Vision, which, as you recall, was one of our answers to in the fun challenge. On a traditional one-year cycle, the Torah portion, Devarim, and the Haftorah from Isaiah 1 they always precede the 9th of Av, Tish B'Av. And so this year, on the Hillel calendar, as well as on, depending on your view of a sighted moon calendar, it would be on the 26th of the month for both of those. It could be the 27th because there was a dispute as to whether the new moon was sighted on I believe it was the 18th of July, but there are, so it could be the same depending on which new moon sighting
That was
calendar.
last Thursday, right?
I guess that's right. So for Shabbat Chazon, this is the first reading. We read this today, but the first verse, this is the vision of Yeshua, the son of Amos, which you saw. So as you read this, my understanding is that this is to teach of the connection, as we read this, between Israel's sins, Israel's transgressions, and the rebellion that causes the calamitous results. In other words, Israel's rebellion leads directly to Israel's catastrophes that happen. And I think it is something that this is vision of Yeshayahu. I think we can see that throughout Israel's history, it's been a history of ups and downs. In other words, they are living large, so to speak. They're enjoying the blessings of the land, and they get overwhelmed by the blessings and think they're the cause of the blessings. And then they decide, oh, well, maybe it's these other deities here that are causing us to get this blessing, because that's what all our local people are telling us. Anyway, so the day Tish B'Av, the 9th of Av, according to tradition, next 4 slides talk about the traditions about it, because we don't see everything that listed here as something that can be immediately verified from an historical source. But what we see is that, according to tradition, it makes sense in terms of the right timing for these, but the exact date, for the temples, we can see that. But for the report of the spies, report of the recon team that comes back, is said to be on the 9th of Av. So the bad report of the spies and Israel's believing the bad report happened on the 9th of Av. Destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians in 586 was accomplished. We see it starting on the 9th of Av. We see that the destruction of the second temple also occurred on the 9th of Av in 70. Some say 69, but I think 70 is correct. The Emperor Hadrian crushed the Bar Kokhba revolt in the Second Jewish War, and the fortress city of Batar was destroyed on the 9th of Av in 135, where over 100,000 Jews were killed. Pope Urban declared the First Crusade, 1095, on the 9th of Av. During this crusade, tens of thousands of Jews were killed. They didn't have to be even in Israel, because a lot of the Crusaders took it out on Jewish people as they were marching across Europe to get to the Promised Land. Another event, the expulsion of Jews from England. It happened in 1290 under the reign of Edward I, aka Edward Longshanks. If you recognize him from Braveheart fame. They were allowed to return, usually return to Israel, or to England in 1655 by Oliver Cromwell, and could become naturalized citizens in 1753. But according to what I've read, no, the edict of expulsion was never formally rescinded.
So
In 14
Shanks did it, but somebody actually has to rescind it for it not to happen again.
That's the question is with or without an edict. I mean, at this point it doesn't seem too likely that it's going to happen again, but it's never been, even with naturalization being allowed in the 1700s, the edict of expulsion was never formally rescinded. 1492, you've probably heard stories about Jews being in basically broken masted vessels as they were expelled forcibly from Spain as Columbus and his ships went past them, and that's why it is generally believed that there were a lot of Jewish sailors on board with Columbus because of the edict of expulsion from Spain in 1492.
I've read that his navigator was Jewish.
Columbus himself is Jewish, but he converted.
1914, after the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand
And his wife Sophie.
and Sophie as well, Russia declared war on Germany because
Was it Russia declaring war on Germany, or was it Russia declaring war on the Habsburg dynasty, the Austrians?
well, I think the assassination took place in front of that, and so Germany's support for the Habsburgs, basically declaring war on Serbia, brought Russia in. When Russia declared war, that was the 9th of Av.
Yeah, because the Russians backed the Serbians, the Germans backed the Habsburgs.
Right.
And France backed Russia,
Yes,
and it was a mess.
was indeed a mess.
You say a century later?
Later that century.
Oh, later
What?
that century.
What's that?
World War II.
Oh, well, yeah.
Holocaust. Did the
German
Holocaust-
resentment from the Treaty of Versailles
Yeah.
helped to cause the Holocaust later in the century. Here's what the Chabad website talks about in the fast of the 9th of Av. It says, mourning the destruction of the temple and the exile of Israel, we abstain from eating and drinking, bathing and wearing of leather footwear, and marital relations for the night and day of Av 9, from sundown on Av 8 to nightfall on Av 9. It's customary to sit on the floor or a low seat until after midday. Torah study is restricted to laws of mourning, passages describing the destruction of the temple, and the like. The tefillin are worn only during the afternoon mincha prayers. So the question comes in, is the 9th of Av a biblical fast?
No.
No.
I'm going to answer that and say, well, it's not Torah, because it's something that happened during the life of Israel, but it is a biblical fast because we see it written in the prophet Zechariah. So leading up to that, this is from Zechariah chapter 8. It says, Adonai Tzevaot says, I will save my people from lands east and west. I'll bring them back, and they will live in Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I'll be their God, with faithfulness and justice. Adonai Tzevaot says, take courage, you who are hearing only now, in these days, these words spoken by the prophets, when the foundation was being laid for building the temple, house of Adonai Tzevaot. This is now moving down a few verses to Zechariah chapter 8, verses 19 to 21 on this particular slide. Adonai Tzevaot says the fast days of the 4th, 5th, 7th, and 10th months are to become times of joy, gladness, and cheer for the house of Yehuda. Therefore, love, truth, and peace. Adonai Tzevaot says, in the future, peoples and inhabitants of many cities will come. The inhabitants of one city will travel to another and say, we must go ask Adonai's favor and consult Adonai Tzevaot. I'll go too, or another translation, I myself am going.
I have a question, since for the house of Judah, what about the other tribes? Shall we joy for the house of Judah?
Well, it was during the destruction of a future prophecy of the second temple would be with Judah, in the sense of right now, and as the time of this writing of Zechariah, the northern tribes, the northern tribes were already scattered to the winds. Because Zechariah is writing between the destruction of the first and second temple.
But why would he say he would you could bring Judah back, but not the rest of them?
Well, that's a good question. Continue on reading. Yes, many peoples and powerful nations will come to consult Adonai Tzevaot in Jerusalem and to ask Adonai's favor. Adonai Tzevaot says, when that time comes, 10 men will take hold, speaking of the languages of the nations, will grab hold of the cloak of a Jew and say, we want to go with you because we have heard that God is with you.
Is that the word kanaf for
Corner or edge, I think that's right. And so the reading of this is grabbing the cloak of a Jew and saying. So it's somebody from the tribe of Judah would be a Jew. Now, it only says a Jew. I would look at this and say, from a messianic or a Nazarene perspective, the 10 that are taking hold of Yeshua's tzitzits. I think that's what's really going on here. And so
I was taught that it was the tallit, corner of the tallit.
yeah, grab the hold cloak of a Jew. I would say that's what's really going on. The word tzitzit is not in the text, but I think that's what's going on. Basically, grabbing the hold of the corner or the edge of a Jewish garment would be.
The word that's used for Jew there, or Judah,
Is it
is it a
Judah?
replacement word, or is the roots of that word actually mean that tribe? Or has it come to mean in that time,
That's where
just Israel?
came, the word Jew came.
Just a second, I can look that up. I don't think I have I have a Chumash here, but not the complete interlinear Bible.
Hold me, drag it on.
Go ahead, drag it on. You're good at that.
Thank you.
Well, I suspect it's the word Yehudi.
Think it's what?
Yehudi, but I'll check and see.
You don't have to.
It's okay.
Report to me in
Zero.
24 hours.
0 dark 30.
Zero dark 30?
No. Yeah.
Zero dark 30?
I don't say no one says O dark 30 unless they're
Yeah,
special
dark 30
forces.
would be better.
0 because it's not an O. It's not the letter O. It's a 0.
Zero dark 30. Oh,
Yes, it's a zero. Yeah, I don't know when people say zero, right? It's a zero.
Well, it is commonly said 0800.
zero.
Like, oh, we don't know.
But if it's abbreviated, you say something like 06. That'd be good. Just a second. It's my program's opening. Or thinking about opening.
You know, that is kind of interesting, but many peoples and powerful nations will come to consult Adonai. I don't know what time frame that will be. Many nations come to consult Adonai.
Shouldn't that be during the Messianic reign?
I would assume so.
If it is 15th, it means it's 6.
I would assume so. Because that's the only time I can see nations going to Israel right now, because right now, even some churches, some of the more prominent churches are joining with the BDS stuff. Like, are you serious? Are you that stupid?
Yes.
Don't understand.
Just like this.
Well, you don't-
Making a sound.
I can find out later. Tell me later.
We are not stopping. We're almost there now.
Oh,
That's finally right. Zechariah 8:23.
yeah.
Please. Yes, you, you know, that's not answering the question.
It is.
You can be
I
full
answer-
and still want.
She wants them.
Mhm.
She will eat them. Right?
Yeah.
Help us out. He
You want
can't eat
those?
anymore, he's full.
I've had enough.
Is Zachary here? He'll be.
Well, I wouldn't give them to you, it's snowing.
When at a
On
time.
Saturday.
What? You can't do that.
The word used here is Yehudi.
Say again?
Yes,
Specific to the tribe.
It says Yehudi. Are you looking at the Hebrew or are you looking at Aramaic?
Hebrew for Zechariah 8:23. Yehudi.
Yehudi.
Ish Zehudi, a man.
Says individual.
A Jewish man, Ish Yehudi. And it is the word kanaf, but the kanaf is the wing or extremity or edge,
That was a good little sign.
corner.
Yeah. He calls us all to be late now.
Late for what?
What is late?
I don't know.
What is time? Let's get there. Philosophical. What is time?
I don't know.
Oh, the time is 1903.
That's military time.
I said, oh, that was 1903, 1903. All right. So what are the fasts of Zechariah chapter 8? Well, here's the listing. The fast of the 4th month, in the second temple period on the 9th day, with the walls of Jerusalem were breached. It was a different day on, I want to say it's the 10th. Although I have to look that up and see which day the walls were breached. The 9th of the 4th month, the walls were breached. Later, the walls of Jerusalem were breached by the Romans on the 17th day of the 4th month. The fast of the 5th month, which is the 9th day of the 5th month, is from the destruction. You can see that in 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah. It's the destruction of both first and second temples, although the burning of it looks like it's the 10th day for the first temple period. The fast of the 7th month is the 3rd day in memory of the murder of Gedaliah from Jeremiah 41. And the fast of the 10th month, the 10th day of the 10th month, is when Nebuchadnezzar began the siege of Jerusalem, according to 2 Kings and such.
Is the 3rd day there, the 7th month, is that not in the days of awe?
It is in the days of awe. Which is
They have
the
to
first,
Rosh Hashanah.
yeah, the first day. Yeah, Rosh Hashanah will be the first. If you look at it from a traditional, exile calendars, the first 2 days are
Right.
that. And the day after those 2 days is the fast of Gedaliah.
Right.
So those are the fasts that would be turning to joy, according to what Zechariah said. So those are the traditional dates. There are within Karaite Judaism, there are other days. Fast days are also considered days of mourning, just like in traditional Judaism. The 24th of Tishri, the 10th of Tevet, the 9th of Tammuz, and the 7th and 10th of Av. So they have, looks like 5 fast days. Karaites consider the period from the 1st of Tammuz until the 10th of Av as a period of mourning for the destruction of the temple. Refraining from eating meat, weddings, and all kinds of entertainment are not permitted. This is taken from Karaites.org, as is this next slide. On the Sabbaths from the 9th of Tammuz until the 10th of Av, 4 or 5 special prayers are read in the morning. On the 7th of Av, after the service, Karaites read special prayers. Their mourning reaches its peak on the 10th of Av. On this day, following the service, Karaites read Lamentations and reading the consolation of Nechamot, and thus the service for that day are concluded. So now, back to our regularly scheduled Torah study.
Yay.
Oh, I like that diversion,
Which one?
where they just returned from.
Want to stay there?
Oh, that was cool.
Okay, so the title of the book, Devarim, so it comes from verse 1. Another title that this is referred to as is Mishneh HaTorah, or second Torah, or repetition of the Torah. And that's where the Greek title comes from, Deuteronomos, essentially, second law, Deuteronomy. Much of the Torah is repeated here, often with a different perspective, although, and this, as you read, it could also be called Devarim because in this book is where we see that the kings of Israel are supposed to write a second copy of the Torah. The key point, though, is that much of the Torah is repeated here. I would say that it's not really a summary of the Torah. It's not really even a summary of Exodus, because while there is some repetition here, only a couple of instances in Exodus are repeated, and there's no mention of the tabernacle in Mishkan. There are a few of the mitzvot that are repeated from Vayikra Leviticus, but none of the mitzvot from Bamidbar or Numbers are in Devarim. So many, if not most, of the mitzvot listed in Devarim appear here for the first time. This book was written about 40 years after the events of the Exodus, based on the timeline, and only when Israel was about to go into the Promised Land. So this is what verse 1 looks like. These are the words from different translations. The word translated here as desert plain is Arabah in Hebrew. You see a lot of translations leave it as untranslated, but what sounds like Arabah to you, as translated as desert plain, of course, would be Arabia, Arabia, right? Suf, a reference to Yam Suf, which I understand means sea is sweeping away, or sea is swept away when the army of Pharaoh was swept away.
Yep. 1,000 feet of water fell on.
So a comment from Rashi, these are the words. He says, these are the words of rebukes. All places where they angered the Almighty are listed here, but out of respect to the people of Israel, Moshe was vague with his words, and he only hinted at their sins by mentioning the places where the sins occurred, and not the sins themselves. So the title of the slide, naming the places but not the sins. So the place is named Arabah in the desert, which for angering him in the desert when they said, if we only had died in Egypt. You see that from Shemot 16. In the plain, that's where Baal Peor was, plains of Moab. Yam Suf, rebellion at Yam Suf, when they were basically not wanting to cross. They were saying, you left us here to be killed by the Egyptians. And Paran was where they were when they rebelled against God with the sin of the reconnaissance team of leaders. Between Tophel and Lavan, Rabbi Yochanan said, we searched the entire Torah, we couldn't find a place called Tophel or Lavan. However, this means that he rebuked them because of the foolish things they had said, Tophlu, about the manna which was white, Lavan, were disgusted by this insubstantial bread. So if you know of a place where it lists between those two place names, Tophel and Lavan, it can't really, I don't know what it would mean, Lebanon, because that's a little bit further north of Israel. So I'm not sure what what that was, except in this,
Wouldn't it relate to Laban? Or not? Maybe I'm off base there.
but these are seems like they're places that if these are truly place names, Laban wouldn't be a place name in the Exodus
Not
story.
the place where Laban was or something. He lived
But he was much, I mean,
pretty thin and
yeah, because, well, I'm saying that the geography wouldn't support that in the sense that Laban, in my understanding, is much further, by where Abraham left from, not during the march from.
well, and was he born yet? During-
Laban?
Yeah,
Yeah, this is well after that, yeah, because Laban was
yeah, so that
coincident with Jacob time
was
frame.
totally off base with that.
Well, I mean, it does seem that there's not there's not an understanding of what that really means. So.
Wait a minute.
Hmm?
Wait a minute. Laban would have been born. He would have been passed.
Right, that's what I mean, Laban was coincident or time frame with
Yeah.
Jacob, right?
Right.
So we'll after this. I'm taking Jacob's bones out. Oh,
Sorry.
he's already buried outside of one. Excuse me. Okay. Hatzerot with the rebellion of Korach. Dizahav, enough gold. What reference that is to the golden calf.
I still can't comprehend. You saw the miracles in Egypt. You saw the entire Egyptian army destroyed in the splitting of the seas. You have a cloud by day and fire by night, a building. And yet you want to build a calf?
The thing is they are also at the base of Sinai right now, and Sinai is covered in a massive cloud with thunder and lightnings.
I'm just saying, that was more hard-headedness than I could ever think.
It's like, how?
Yeah, but it's
Okay,
just
we
guess.
can one person.
Maybe they thought that, well, all of that miracle stuff was because God had a great relationship with Moses. Now he's gone.
Or about to go.
We're about to go, yeah.
Or at Sinai, he had gone. We don't, the things we don't know if he's coming back or not.
Yeah, so we've got no go-between. We don't know if God will treat us right or not.
But you see how, I mean, how humanity, if we see, at this point in time, we didn't see Israel's history of also doing the same sorts of things. They go in the land and almost, within a couple generations, they're already falling away. But same thing, I mean, how true is it from, the generation of 1776 to the generation of 2023 in the US,
Mhm.
right?
Well, that's a couple hundred years,
True.
but it started maybe 100 years plus ago.
It's not quite the same as it was. We'll just say that, right?
I totally agree.
Not the same as it was when I was just a boy, and that's not that long ago.
Yeah. But that was in the 1700s, right?
Weren't dinosaurs alive then?
Early 1800s. Give me some credit.
Yeah, okay.
Weren't dinosaurs alive then?
Yeah,
Still
there were
are.
a few.
They're just smaller. They're called crocodiles and things like that.
Well, they still got pterodactyls in the Arizona desert, from what I understand.
I saw a picture of that the other day, or somebody talking about it at least. So in terms of number of quotations, Book of Devarim is third overall quotations in the Ketuvim Netzrim. It's number one in terms of from the Torah. It falls after Isaiah and Psalms in terms of overall quotations. And it is a covenant document. The word covenant, Brit, appears nearly 30 times in the text of the Book of Devarim.
It is one of my favorite ones.
I agree. I really do. It is one of my favorite ones too. Probably my favorite of the Torah.
Isn't technically Devarim basically the new covenant?
Well, it's
That,
in there. Yeah.
that everybody's
Chapter-
called, the New Testament, they call it the New Covenant, but actually all that's because of Devarim.
Does Devarim have any of the commands in it for the Kohanim?
I don't think it has really anything from Vayikra.
So it's more of the commands for the average Joe on the street.
In a lot of ways, yeah, because it is talking about Israel's history.
Maybe that's why not a lot of the other commands are in there, because the others, maybe a lot of them apply
Specifically
to
The
the
Mishkan.
Mishkan, the priests, and all that.
And this does seem to do a catch up for that from, none of the mitzvot from Devarim none of the mitzvot from Numbers, Midbar in here, and very few from Vayikra. So this is kind of a catch up for, the closing out ceremony of what else Israel is supposed to do to get up to the
So
600.
this is more for the average man.
I think so. I think there's a good way of looking at it that way.
Blessings and cursings.
So Ashtaroth. It came to pass in the 43rd, 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that the Lord had commanded him regarding them. After he had smitten Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtaroth, in Edrei. So on that phrase, Ashtaroth, you might recognize that as derived from a deity name. It's a feminine counterpart to Baal, Asherah. She was a moon goddess, also known as Astarte, Ishtar, Esther, Venus. The Anglo-Saxon form is pronounced as Easter. Israel here is told to possess the land. As far as where? Those are my questions. As far as the Euphrates River, which is a bit of a drive, so to speak, from downtown Jerusalem.
Just a wee bit.
Yet to be fulfilled.
Yeah, that's a good. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Verse 21 says, "To go up and take it. Don't be afraid to take it. To take it. Don't be dismayed. So fear not. In other words." So the question kind of comes up: which land belongs to Israel? Is it just the postage stamp size there? Is it a bit wider?
It's a bit wider and a bit longer.
Why did Moshe tell Israel to not fear and to not be discouraged or dismayed?
Because they probably would be.
I think it's exactly because they probably would be. He told them that because they would be discouraged. So here's a question: did Israel take all the land? If Israel never actually took possession of the land, at least by Joshua's time, how do we reconcile this next passage that says this? So Adonai gave Israel all the land which he swore to give to their ancestors, and they took possession of it and lived in it. Then Adonai gave them rest all around, according to everything he had sworn to their ancestors. Not a man from all their enemies stood against them. Adonai handed all their enemies over to them. So the way I look at this, and to reconcile this, is first to look at what the command was given here to Abraham. And this says, to Abraham in Bereshit of Genesis 17, Yah told Abraham that he would give him and his descendants all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. So continuing on with that line of inquiry, we see that in Shemot 13, two different occasions there, it talks about the land of the Canaanite being taken over. So there are two different promises here being given. One, and I don't have slides that go to that one, but the idea of basically the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates is not just from this reading of the Torah. It occurs elsewhere as well. But there is also the smaller promise, the promise of Canaan land, which I take it is what Joshua is referring to when he says you've taken all of this land. Because in history, there are some that would, and I've seen at least historians or maybe biblical historians talk about the extent of Solomon's empire, and some place it as far as to the Euphrates River.
You certainly had the influence there.
He was a
So-
big dog, that's for sure.
It seems to me that that promise in terms of the peace that follows after it, didn't hold up after Solomon's time. So that was a type and shadow of the ultimate fulfillment of that, but not
Yeah.
the good thing.
Abraham's seed was not just Israel.
True.
So was it talking about his entire seed, even of the countries that occupy that now, like Arabs and all that?
Well, if I'd have to go back and do your research, but I think it clarifies to the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that would be more specific.
Yep.
Okay, the
Because
promise to
there was
Abraham
a-
could be conceived as all of his children or whatever you call it. But then it further tightens it down and defines it on the next generation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
Both the Ishmaelites were given their own section
Yeah.
of land.
Yeah.
So were the Edomites, which were Esau's children, and Lot wasn't
Lot's
even
children.
Lot was only a nephew. He wasn't even a child of Abraham.
Yeah, he's got taken over now.
I guess we have to wait.
Devarim 1:10-11 says, Adonai your God has multiplied you, and you are today like the stars of the heavens in number. May Adonai God of your fathers increase you 1,000 times as many as you are, and may he bless you just as he promised, which say your descendants, I think is what it's down there. Which is he promised you, excuse me. So, on a given night, to the naked eye, how many stars do you see? Well,
I used to know that number that the astronomers said. Is that 3,000?
3,000 is visible on a given thing. So definitely Israel's descendants were well beyond the stars they could see. A handheld telescope can get you up to 30,000, but by this time, we know that Israel had well passed both of those figures. So I'm looking at it, if you look at it from like a heavenly perspective, if the host of heavens means stars, then the number can't be counted, according to Jeremiah. And Israel is 1,000 times an uncountable number. And scientists estimate that the number of stars to be 10 to the 25th power. 1 followed by 25 Zeds.
Well, that's especially true since they've been scattered throughout the world.
So no human could live long enough to count that number of stars. So an uncountable number, I think, is a good way to interpret that figure.
Thing is that one of the other prophecies or promises was that they would also outnumber the sands on the seashore, and science has determined that there are more grains of sand on a seashore, on any given seashore, than there are stars in the heavens. The 10 to the 20 heavens, there is even more.
You know, but is that taken literally? Should we take that literally or just saying, hey, you can't number it?
It's
I
a-
do literally myself.
Well, how can you take it literally if you don't know the literal amount?
Well, there is a tradition I've heard, but not actually encountered it in writing, that says when Abraham was given the promise that his children would be as many as the stars in heavens, he started counting.
They don't even have a number for 25.
He said, man, I'm gonna need a lot of wives.
Where's my abacus?
No. I think he, after the second one, he just kind of figured that ain't working out so well.
Well, he did have wives after Sarah and had children with them.
He only had one. Sarah and Hagar.
No, after Sarah died, he
Then
married
there
again.
was Keturah.
Yeah.
But they say Keturah was also Hagar. And she stayed relatively pure, or she stayed pure, or whatever. That's what I heard.
It
Because
was,
I'm
it
pretty sure he
was-
had children with whatever wife came after Sarah. Keturah, whatever. her name
Torah is the
after
name
Sarah
here.
died, he grieved, then he gave everything to his son, and then he went on to have his own life. And his new wife was, the person who Moses' father-in-law was that? From that.
Keturah.
And he
It's
had,
in the Bible. It
and he
says
had children
Keturah.
by her, and he had children by her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it said.
Lots of them.
There's the only three. But both Islam and the Jewish people, sages say that they believe Keturah was actually Hagar. That she remained chaste until after the death of Sarah. So I don't know how long that would have been, but it's tradition, so anywhere from 2 to 3, and that was about it. So you had Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. That's the only ones I know of listed. It didn't say yet other could come about.
Right. There's a team down at the other end doing stuff.
Wow, I
Pretty
thought
sure
it was a
that's-
musical being played.
Sound marching.
Yeah, so I'm wondering where those other children went
What are the children?
with Keturah.
Saudi Arabia.
Maybe.
Yep.
They wondered.
So our text also has a phrase, as a man bears his son. So it kind of reminds me of the footprints in sand picture. But Israel, as we do as well, often think, you do not carry me here, and you are not strong enough to carry me to that land. That's kind of where Israel spent a lot of time in that sense.
As a man bears his son, for some reason, JD pops into my mind.
Yeah, good point. That's excellent thought on that. Yeah. I agree with that. Well, we get to there's a sort of a time thing here. Don't go up. So there's a time when Israel's supposed to go up, as in when they were given that command to do so, and then there's a time when they're not supposed to go up, and they have it backwards. We've sinned, so we want to rectify that. Well, let's go up and take it now. But he told them, verse 32, don't go up. I'm not with you, and you will be defeated by your enemies.
Now, what part of that did they not understand? Seriously? I guess that's why I got such a problem with them right there is, again, all this stuff out there happens. All right, you do a golden calf and God gets a little upset with you and smokes you. Now you're like, okay. And still, you have the spies go in and spy it out, come back. And it's like, stop with the madness.
Doesn't the Bible say they were a stiff-necked bunch?
Hard as
I think they
nails.
were trying to, that may have been their way of trying to get God to forgive them. Okay, God, we'll go do it. We know you were right. We'll go do it.
Yeah, let's
But
do it.
the
Let's do it now.
precise, they forgot the lesson of the two priests who were burnt by offering unauthorized fire.
Yeah.
God has a preciseness to his command. They forgot half the command. Half the command was to go do it, but the other half was at that time period.
Too late. Now it's too late.
Now you're walking
Don't go
The
forward.
second time, they took it upon themselves to set the time
Yeah,
period.
so they got two for the price of one. So say 2 sins for the price of one. So they kept on sinning.
I mean, I think they really thought they were doing
Do the right thing.
the right thing. Yeah, we made God mad. Now let's go do what he said do.
From a human perspective, it doesn't make sense. We're going to rectify our.
It's like the
We're going to
part
be
they
brave now.
forgot.
Now we're brave.
It's like the part they forgot was, hey, you were supposed to listen to Moses and do what he said do. And Moses is going, yeah, God's not with us. We don't go. And they went anyway.
How many times have we been taught through those things that there was a preciseness to God's command?
Oh, yeah.
precise.
Yeah.
You don't go outside of those boundaries.
Gee, there it is. There's a time for not doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Time for doing something, time for not doing something.
Isn't there a verse in, or a segment in Psalms about that? Or was that Proverbs?
Don't give me the
Time to
word.
reap, a time to sow.
Time
It's
to.
Ecclesiastes.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's Ecclesiastes.
Yes. It was a Solomon thing, I think.
Birds.
Yeah.
God even set time on
Yes.
His creation, time limits.
Not many people.
You grow during this period of time, you do this during this period of time.
I know the Beatles sang it.
They didn't come up with it. The birds.
Most of them did.
There is a time, how they go?
There is
There is a
season,
time, turn.
Turn, yeah.
There is a season.
Oh, we're getting way off.
I think the Birds made that most popular, but I don't think they were actually even the originators of that song.
I thought they were.
I think there's somebody that did it before them.
No.
But it didn't get airplay that theirs did. Theirs is a better version.
Hmm. Was it an American group or was it a British group?
I think it's American.
Bunny Yards or Love and Spoonful, I know that. So many. One off dance, We Five. How many people know that?
We, I
Yes.
can't remember that.
Well, I woke up this morning. You were on my mind.
Oh, okay. See, I remember songs, but not artists.
So be neighborly, it says to do so for Esau here, as
Pete
well
Seeger.
as Moab.
1959.
Year I was born.
Who?
Pete Seeger.
Oh, okay. I don't know what band he was.
He wasn't have a band. He was a independent musician, sang a lot of anti-Vietnam War songs. He was most famous for.
So it was on the Limelighters album.
So with being neighborly here, Esau, he was always trying to fight his brother.
Yeah.
And here God says, I'm not gonna give you any of their stuff, don't even think about it, say you'll pay for it and move on.
It's the idea that once a promise is given by Yah, that promise is irrevocable. You can't. It's not going to be changed, even if you are quote unquote the chosen people. There's still things that aren't yours. He gave promises to others that he's gonna keep those promises.
Even to this day, Moab and Ammon are still around.
See, so the next one is Ammon or Ammon. There's a famous capital, Amman, Jordan, right?
Heshmite kingdom. You know, they were tribes. It was tribes all the way up to 1917 about.
So this tells us that everything doesn't belong to Israel. The sons of Esau and Lot are not Israel, and Yah made provisions for non-Israel.
It's like the part
Who's that?
It's echoing the same. All right, so I don't really have any slides, more slides that are talking about the Torah portion. I've got slides that talking about the Haftorah briefly. What else do you want to talk about in our Torah portion today?
Next.
One.
So, we'll hear this one next. Yes.
Haftorah.
Yes, yeah.
This is taken from Chabad's study of the Haftorah. This is the third in the series of 3 Haftorot of affliction. These are read during the 3 weeks of the mourning for Jerusalem. In other words, dating back to when the wall of the city was breached on the 17th day of the 4th month and the 9th of Av here. Isaiah relays to the Jews to a godly vision experience, chastising the residents of Judah and Jerusalem for having rebelled against God and criticizing them for repeating their errors and not abandoning their sinful ways. It's kind of what prophets do, right? Prophets do that.
Do you know? Because Isaiah Hananiah and Yirmiyahu contemporaries to a point where they separated by a couple of years?
I think contemporaries to a point. I don't think they were.
And they overlapped a little.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's what
And there's, yeah. So, because basically all kind of before the destruction of the first temple.
Right.
They were reprimanded and punished, but says they forsook God, they provoked the Holy One of Israel. As well, in leadership, are being compared to Sodom and Gomorrah, which are pretty much the lower end of the spectrum in terms of favor because of their obedience or lack of obedience. Their sacrifices were flavored with pagan customs.
I want to say that a lot of that comes from because of Solomon and his plethora of pagan wives.
Well, this is much later, though. I mean, Israel's
But that's where it started.
much farther away. Could well be. I mean, he was chastised for that as well. The wisest man making horrible decisions like that.
But his son that took after him, Rehoboam, he didn't tear down anything.
Yeah, let all the, combine your power base and make it more, a bigger tent. That's what modern politicians like to do.
That's what I don't understand about Solomon though in this, because if he was wise, why did he do this? He shouldn't have taken any foreign wife.
Well, because he was also thinking outside the land, and was building. It's the same thing that kings of England did, but only he was taking one wife at a time to build relationships, like any king does, to solidify or build a relationship with a foreign power. If you want to have a relationship with,
You marry a woman from that.
marry one from France, for example, to bring peace with France.
Now Henry V, he was probably into that. The rest of them, not so much. I don't know. I see your point though, but still.
Well, the problem wasn't marrying a foreign woman; it was also bringing in her foreign
Yeah.
deities
Setting up
into.
places of worship.
Yeah.
In
So
Israel.
she feels comfortable. She and her household. You have to bring in her deities, which that was.
My point was, why didn't he just tell them, that, for me to marry you, she will have to worship my God.
It kind of brings the point, though, of even the wisest man who ever lived was capable of making really unwise decisions that would have lasting effect.
Dum dum dum.
The persuasion of a woman.
Yep. Gets you every time.
That's why when God created woman, he stepped back and looked at her and thinking what he was going to name her, and he said, "Woe unto man."
Yep. Oh, man. Well, let me tell you this. Oh, didn't work out so well. Somewhat.
So here's sort of a contrast, sort of a hitting with a hammer and then gentler words. How has she become a harlot, a faithful city? It was once full of justice in which righteousness would hope, and now it is a city of murderers. Then Isaiah turns to speaking more gentler words, people causing or asking her to repent from active justice and kindness towards the needy, the orphans, the widows, and promising them the best of the land in return for their obedience, because that's what he's looking for. Now, if your sins prove to be crimson, they will become white as snow. Of course, this is in many ways a messianic prophecy as well, I would say. If they prove to be as red as crimson, they will become as wool, in other words, light colored white. Haftorah concludes with the promises that God will eventually reestablish Israel's judges and leaders, when Zion will be redeemed through justice and her penitence through righteousness. The first word of the portion is chazon. In other words, the vision of Isaiah. So, as I mentioned earlier, when this is read during the Shabbat before Tish B'Av, Shabbat of Vision, according to Hasidic tradition, on this Shabbat, the soul of every Jew is treated to a vision of the third holy temple that will be rebuilt with the coming of Mashiach.
I didn't know that.
That's cool. I read this not in just Chabad source, but there's an American from New York who made Aliyah. She talked about it in her blog this week about hoping for a vision of the third temple.
I think a lot of people are. I know I am. I don't know about a vision, but I'd like to see it.
That's probably why there's been a lot of conversations this week about mushrooms. I'm just saying.
Mushrooms. I like mushrooms. Portobello mushrooms, specifically.
The boring kind.
They're apple. Sauteed them just right.
All right. So, final slide here is, what are Dixie's questions?
Other information.
Why does water taste so great?
Question is, where is that stream?
Fort Sill, America.
Really? Let's see, there's a couple of
Just
streams.
on the west side of the polo field.
The what field?
The polo field.
Oh, okay, I know where you're at. Right before the housing area.
I believe this is what it is. Yeah. Well, if there are no questions, let's close and pray. Abba, thank you for allowing us to study your word, to midrash on it, to chew on it. Abba, thank you for the Shabbat of Vision. We do pray for the coming of your next temple. In Yeshua's name we pray this. Amen.
I thought you were gonna do something with Netanyahu too, I guess not.
You didn't bring it up?
I've always heard,